Since last August, there had been a period of calm. The screaming, hair-on-fire pronouncements about terror plots that may have had real plotters but no real conceivable chance of actually happening had ceased. That period spanned the time between the 2006 midterm elections and the week we reached exactly 18 months until the 2008 presidential election. Just a coincidence. Our third story in the countdown, from the mind-bending idea that four guys dressed as pizza delivery men were going to outgun all the soldiers at Fort Dix, to the not-too-thought-out plan to blow up JFK Airport by lighting a match 40 miles away. Here we go again. Time for an update of our segment, The Nexus of Politics and Terror. Instances now 13 in number when those two worlds have overlapped, and we are reminded by our government, with or without justification, that we should always fear fear itself. We offer two prefaces tonight. One, the words of Dennis Milligan, the new state chairman of the Republican Party in Arkansas, who says about Iraq to the newspaper The Arkansas Democrat-Gazette, quote, "At the end of the day, I believe fully the president is doing the right thing, and I think all we need is some attacks on American soil like we had on September 11th, 2001, and the naysayers will come around very quickly to appreciate not only the commitment for President Bush, but the sacrifice that has been made by men and women to protect this country. All we need is some attacks on American soil," said the Republican Party chairman in Arkansas. Arkansas, in the United States. That Arkansas. The other preamble, we remind you again that coincidences can happen, that the logical fallacy insists that just because event A occurs and then event B occurs, that does not automatically mean that event A caused event B. But neither does it say the opposite. The Nexus of Politics and Terror, updated through today. Please judge for yourself. Number 1, May 18th, 2002. The first details of the President's daily briefing of August 6, 2001 are revealed, including its title, Bin Laden Determined to Strike in U.S. The same day, another memo is discovered revealing the FBI knew of men with links to al-Qaeda training at an Arizona flight school. The memo was never acted upon. Questions about 9/11 intelligence failures are swirling. May 20th, 2002.
Terror warnings from the highest levels of the federal government tonight are just
2 days later.
Warning.
FBI Director Mueller declares that another terrorist attack is inevitable.
Tonight, there are even more warnings.
The next day, the Department of Homeland Security issues warnings of attacks against railroads nationwide and against New York City landmarks like the Brooklyn Bridge and the Statue of Liberty.
That agility that
Number 2,
Dr. Mueller was
Thursday, June 6, 2002.
I never really anticipated this kind of impact.
Colleen Rowley, the FBI agent who tried to alert her superiors to the specialized flight training taken by Zacarias Moussaoui, whose information suggests the government missed a chance to break up the 9/11 plot, testifies before Congress. Senate Intelligence Committee Chair Graham says Rowley's testimony has inspired similar pre-9/11 whistleblowers. Monday, June 10th, 2002. 4 days later,
we have disrupted an unfolding terrorist plot.
Speaking from Russia, Attorney General John Ashcroft reveals that an American named Jose Padilla is under arrest, accused of plotting a radiation bomb attack in this country. In fact, Padilla had by this time already been detained for more than 1 month. Number 3, February 5th, 2003. Secretary of State Powell tells the United Nations Security Council of Iraq's concealment of weapons, including his 18 mobile biological weapons laboratories, justifying a UN or U.S. first strike. Many in the UN are doubtful. Months later, much of the information proves untrue. February 7th, 2003. 2 days later, as anti-war demonstrations continue to take place around the globe.
Take some time to prepare for an emergency.
Homeland Security Secretary Ridge cites credible threats by al-Qaeda and raises the terror alert level to orange. 3 days after that, Fire Administrator David Paulison, who would become the acting head of FEMA after the Hurricane Katrina disaster, advises Americans to stock up on plastic sheeting and duct tape to protect themselves against radiological or biological attack. Number 4, July 23rd, 2003. The White House admits that the CIA, months before the President's State of the Union address, expressed strong doubts about the claim that Iraq had attempted to buy uranium from Niger. On the 24th, the congressional report on the 9/11 attacks is issued. It criticizes government at all levels. It reveals an FBI informant had been living with two of the future hijackers. It concludes that Iraq had no link to Al-Qaeda. 28 pages of the report are redacted. On the 26th, American troops are accused of beating Iraqi prisoners. July 29th, 2003. 3 days later, amid all of the negative headlines,
Word of a possible new Al-Qaeda attack.
Homeland Security issues warnings of further terrorist attempts to use airplanes for suicide attacks. Number 5, December 17th, 2003. 9/11 Commission co-chair Thomas Kean says the attacks were preventable. The next day, a federal appeals court says the government cannot detain suspected radiation bomber Jose Padilla indefinitely without charges, and the chief U.S. weapons inspector in Iraq, Dr. David Kay, who has previously announced he has found no weapons of mass destruction there, announces he will resign his post. December 21st, 2003. 4 days later, the Sunday before Christmas.
Today, the United States government raised the national threat level.
Homeland Security again raises the threat level to orange, claiming credible intelligence of further plots to crash airliners into U.S. cities. Subsequently, 6 international flights into this country are canceled after some passenger names purportedly produced matches on government no-fly lists. The French later identify those matched names. One belongs to an insurance salesman from Wales, another to an elderly Chinese woman, a third to a 5-year-old boy. Number 6. March 30th, 2004, the new chief weapons inspector in Iraq, Charles Dulfer, tells Congress, we have still not found any WMD in that country. And after weeks of having refused to appear before the 9/11 Commission, Condoleezza Rice relents and agrees to testify. On the 31st, 4 Blackwater USA contractors working in Iraq are murdered, their mutilated bodies dragged through the streets and left on public display in Fallujah. The role of civilian contractors in Iraq is now widely questioned. April 2nd, 2004.
The FBI has issued a new warning tonight to
Homeland Security issues a bulletin warning that terrorists may try to blow up buses and trains using fertilizer and fuel bombs, like the one detonated in Oklahoma City. Bombs stuffed into satchels or duffel bags. Number 7, May 16th, 2004. Secretary of State Powell appears on Meet the Press. Moderator Tim Russert closes by asking him about the enormous personal credibility Powell had placed before the UN in laying out a case against Saddam Hussein. An aide to Powell interrupts the question, saying the interview is over.
I think that was one of your staff, Mr. Secretary. I don't think that's appropriate.
Powell finishes his answer, admitting that much of the information he had been given about weapons of mass destruction in Iraq was
inaccurate and wrong, and in some cases deliberately misleading.
On the 21st, new photos showing mistreatment of Iraqi prisoners at Abu Ghraib prison are released. On the 24th, Associated Press video from Iraq confirms U.S. forces mistakenly bombed a wedding party, killing more than 40. Wednesday, May 26, 2004. 2 days later.
Good afternoon.
Attorney General Ashcroft and FBI Director Mueller warned that intelligence from multiple sources
indicates Al-Qaeda's specific intention to hit the United States hard.
And that 90% of the arrangements for an attack on the United States were complete. The color-coded warning system is not raised. The Homeland Security Secretary, Tom Ridge, does not attend the announcement. Number 8, July 6, 2004. Democratic presidential candidate John Kerry selects Senator John Edwards as his vice presidential running mate, producing a small bump in the election opinion polls and producing a huge swing in media attention towards the Democratic campaign. July 8, 2004. 2 days later,
Credible reporting now indicates that Al-Qaeda is moving forward with its plans to carry out a large-scale attack in the United States.
Homeland Secretary Ridge warns of information about Al-Qaeda attacks during the summer or autumn. 4 days after that, the head of the U.S. Election Assistance Commission, DeForest B. Soares Jr., confirms he has written to Ridge about the prospect of postponing the upcoming presidential election in the event it is interrupted by terrorist acts. Number 9, July 29, 2004. At their party convention in Boston, the Democrats formally nominate John Kerry as their candidate for president. As in the wake of any convention, the Democrats now dominate the media attention over the subsequent weekend. August 1st, 2004, Monday morning, 3 days later.
It is as reliable group of sources that we've ever seen before.
The Department of Homeland Security raises the alert status for financial centers in New York, New Jersey, and Washington to orange. The evidence supporting the warning, reconnaissance data left in a home in Iraq, later proves to be roughly 4 years old and largely out of date. Number 10, October 6, 2005, 10 a.m. Eastern Time. The President addresses the National Endowment for Democracy, once again emphasizing the importance of the war on terror and insisting his government has broken up at least 10 terrorist plots since 9/11. At 3 p.m. Eastern Time, 5 hours after the President's speech has begun, the Associated Press reports that Karl Rove will testify again to the CIA leak grand jury, and that Special Prosecutor Fitzgerald has told Rove he cannot guarantee that he will not be indicted.
We're awaiting a news conference at the bottom of the hour. New York City.
At 5:17 p.m. Eastern Time, 7 hours after the President's speech has begun, New York officials disclose a bomb threat to the city's subway system based on information supplied by the federal government. A Homeland Security spokesman says the intelligence upon which the disclosure is based is of doubtful credibility. And it later proves that New York City had known of the threat for at least 3 days and had increased police presence in the subways long before making the announcement at that particular time. Local New York television station WNBC reports it had the story of the threats days in advance of the announcement, but was asked by high-ranking federal officials in New York and Washington to hold off on its story. Less than 4 days after having revealed the threat, Mayor Michael Bloomberg of New York says, "Since the period of the threat now seems to be passing, I think over the immediate future we'll slowly be winding down the enhanced security." While news organizations ranging from the New York Post to NBC News quote sources who say there was reason to believe the informant who triggered the warning simply made it up. A senior U.S. counterterrorism official tells the New York Times, quote, "There was no there. Number 11, a sequence of events in August 2006 best understood now in chronological order. As the month begins, the controversy over domestic surveillance without legal warrants in this country crests. Then on August 9th, the day after the Connecticut Democratic senatorial primary, Vice President Cheney says the victory of challenger Ned Lamont over incumbent Joe Lieberman is a positive for the, quote, Al-Qaeda types, who he says, quote, clearly are betting on the proposition that ultimately they break the will of the American people in terms of our ability to stay in the fight. The next day, British authorities arrest 24 suspects in an alleged imminent plot to blow up U.S.-bound aircraft using liquid explosives smuggled on board in sports drink bottles. Domestic air travel is thrown into chaos as carry-on liquids are suddenly banned. On August 14th, British intelligence reveals it did not think the plot was imminent, only the U.S. did, and our authorities pressed to make the arrests. 11 of the 24 suspects are later released. And in the months to come, the carry-on liquids ban is repeatedly relaxed. Number 12, May 7, 2007, Greensburg, Kansas, leveled by a tornado, and the state's governor notes more in sorrow than in anger that the redeployment of so much of the Kansas National Guard and its equipment to Iraq might now cripple the soldiers' ability to respond if another disaster hits Kansas.
What we're really missing is equipment, and that is putting a strain on recoveries like this one.
The next day, the authorities announce arrests in a far-fetched plan to attack soldiers at Fort Dix in New Jersey. The so-called terrorists plan to gain access to the base by posing as pizza delivery men. It is not a suicide mission. They state clearly they intend to kill personnel and then retreat to safety, even though they were going to attack a closed compound full of trained soldiers with weapons. And though the plan is branded sophisticated, its perpetrators are not sophisticated enough to have not handed over the videotape of themselves training with weapons to a Circuit City store in order to be transferred to DVD. The Fort Dix plot not only erases from most news coverage the issue of disaster readiness in Kansas, but it also obscures the next day's story that in anticipation of his testimony to a House panel, Attorney General Alberto Gonzales has submitted opening remarks that match virtually word for word the remarks he had given the previous month to a Senate committee.
Recognizing my limited involvement in the process,
A mistake I freely acknowledge.
a mistake that I freely acknowledge, I have soberly questioned my prior decisions.
And number 13, June 2007, the JFK plot to blow up the jet fuel pipeline feeding John F. Kennedy International Airport in New York City, thus causing the entire airport to be consumed in a horrific conflagration. One of the men arrested has, as a past employee, access to the sprawling complex, but little knowledge of the reality of the pipeline system. The manager of that system tells the New York Times that the pipeline is not some kind of fuse. Shut-off valves throughout would have easily contained any damage, just as a leak in a tunnel in any city would not flood everything in that city below ground. The so-called plot happens to be revealed the day before the second Democratic presidential debate. And as the scandal continues to unfold over the firings of U.S. attorneys and their replacements by political hacks, the so-called plot is announced by the Bush-appointed U.S. attorney for Brooklyn, New York, and by the police chief of New York City, the father of a correspondent for Fox News Channel. In all fairness, we could probably construct a similar timeline of terror events and their relationship to the haircuts of popular politicians. But if merely a reasonable case can be made that any of these juxtapositions of events are more than just coincidences, if that case can be made on this, the very day that a military judge at Guantanamo Bay dismissed all terror charges that have kept Salim Hamdan jailed there for 5 years, it underscores the need for questions to be asked and asked continually in this country. Questions about what is prudence and what is just fear-mongering.